But you said earlier, you know, honest conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was, I think, the basis of our relationship, and the thing that you really, for me, really helped me with was to go, hey, let's really look at this martial arts thing honestly. Does that thing really work? Well, now why are you teaching that if it doesn't really work? Okay, well, I could fool myself and just say, well, you know, in a real self-defense situation, it can happen. It's possible that this thing could work. But honestly, if you're going to train a fighter for the cage, you're not going to train them in things that, you know, this might happen once every 15 years if you're fighting every day. Right? So I'm just, that whole honesty thing. And, you know, my background as a scientist, you know, biology degree from USC and working in labs and such, you know, really it comes down to that scientific method of saying, hey, first we have to have humility, or we say, I don't know the truth here.
Right.
Let me go find it. I'm not just going to say, hey, this is the way it is. I'm not going to look at anything else. Let's just be honest about it, and then go do valid testing, not fake testing. Someone's holding their arm out for you and you do all these things and they fall down.
Right.
But let's add some resistance in there and actually get to it and see what works and what doesn't.
The thing that did annoy me the most in the Jeet Kune Do community at that time, in the circles that I was swinging around, is I saw a tremendous amount of hypocrisy and cynicism. And the idea was, and this was an idea that came from the top down because I heard it, was some people are fighters and some people aren't fighters. And some people will get it, and if they want to spar, they'll get it. And others, you know, they're not going to get it. And it was a kind of, it reminded me of, I'll go back to using religion as an analogy. If you're having a one-on-one debate with a religious person, religious preacher, and at some point they play the faith card and say, well, you know, we don't really know. And of course, Exodus isn't a historical rendition of what happened, and Noah's Ark wasn't real, and they didn't actually put two animals on there. It's a metaphor. And then when he gets in front of the congregation, he preaches it as if it's not a metaphor. And if you were to poll the congregation, 80% of the congregation thinks the story of Noah's Ark is a news report. And then when you call him on it, he says, well, you know, some people will understand it, some people won't. That bothers me from the standpoint of, I don't think it's just a good way to treat people or a good way to go around thinking about the world. And I saw so much of that in the JKD community. There were people who did get it to some degree, at least with the stand-up, they understood. But there was, and you're definitely don't fall in this category at all. Like I said in the beginning when we started this conversation, you were always super positive, and everybody I've ever spoken to that knows you's had the same positive experience where you've encouraged people to pursue their own truth. But there was that, and I wonder if my experience was different from yours, or if you saw the same thing there.
No. Yeah, I think that there, in many parts of that the JKD community, there's still this idea that sparring, it's too hard for people. It's rough. Now, I must say, when I first started I actually started my training in 79, and then 1980 is when I started the Conolley Academy, Dan Andosano and Richard Bastillo's school. And we trained for about 2 months, and then we were told to bring boxing gloves next week, bring boxing gloves. And so they would start a new class. They'd call everybody, hey, you're on the waiting list, we're starting a new class. So there are at least 30, I think there were more than 30, but at least 30 people started that class. 2 months later, still about 30 people in the class. I mean, it was really good training. It's very athletic training. You know, we were hitting mitts and kicking the shield and moving around and all. Then we put the boxing gloves on. We had the first sparring session. The next class, there were 7 people. And so there is that fear that, oh man, if, you know, some people just can't handle it. Maybe that's where it came from. I don't know, that kind of idea. But the truth is, if we do it intelligently, if we have people spar intelligently and add progressive resistance, vary the intensity, bring them along little at a time, just like you do in baseball. You don't take a 10-year-old and you throw, you know, 95-mile-an-hour fastball at them.
Right.
You bring them along, and it's fine. But that's why in my classes, somebody comes in the very first day they spar. First day, but they just go open hand and they're going to touch top of the head cover. And so already they're in that context of aliveness and feeling that they're dealing with a resisting partner.
Right.
So that's the context. But back to what you were saying, absolutely. There tend to be in some people this, we can never say all, but there tend to be a lot of people like, oh, they can't handle it. And then there were people that didn't want to do it themselves. When I started doing it wasn't called Dog Brothers when I started. So this is full contact stick fighting, which is a helmet. Some have a little hand protection, sometimes a knee protection as well. You did it, and at your school.
Yeah, we did it together when you come up.
Right, exactly. And so when I started doing that, there were a lot of people in the JKD community or the Filipino martial arts community. There were a lot of people that were like, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's crazy, and all this sort of thing. I heard instructors telling students, don't go near those guys. Do not. They're going to try to get you to do that. Don't do it. It's a really bad idea. Now, I have to say, to be clear, Dan Inosanto was the one that let us stay after hours.
Right.
And Eric Noss told me this just recently. I didn't realize it, but he'd say, okay, yeah. He gave Eric the key, I believe, and he said, okay, lock up afterwards. No killings tonight, right? And that was about it. But he encouraged us because, this is a thing. Okay, I'm going to say my point of view, everybody. For those JKD people out there, I'm going to tell you my honest point of view. I am loyal to Dan Inosanto, and I love him. He's really been extraordinarily generous with me for decades. One night in class, when I was visiting LA, and I go to his class when I go to visit, and I spend time with him also, but in teaching class, he stops and he starts talking about sparring. And truthfully, when I come, he would tend to do more sparring things because he knows me. And that would be a cue for him to do sparring things in class or talk about it. And he actually said, there's a fighting art, and then there's just, there's the art. And because I like teaching the art. And he just said it like that. Mm-hmm. Like, I know it's, there's fighting. I just like teaching the art. Mm-hmm. Now, in my experience, a lot of times people are learning the art, but they think they know how to fight. Right. That's an issue.
Right. That's what
a lot of the
about, without providing the context. Do you say that every time you start that section? This is art, people. We're not going to be using it for fighting. I mean, it's a fine line. And pretty soon you have 90% of the congregation believing it's a news report. One of the things I really like talking to you about, and we talked about this when we were in Niagara Falls, is teaching and leadership. And you gave a great leadership talk at the camp in Atlanta last year. Was it last year? No, it's last year, yeah.
It was last year. It was the spring camp.
Spring, yeah.
Yep.
And those are some of my favorite subjects. And those are also a good percentage of the questions we received. But we've got quite a few. So I'm just going to jump right in and go for it.
Fire away. Like I said, be careful what you ask me because I'll generally answer it.
Well, that's the best part, right? So, Dr. John was asking about essential qualities for leadership.
Yeah.
In particular, how you can use those lessons or those qualities in everyday life for just the average person.
Yeah, I think I saw that question. And I think there might have been an aspect of that question. It was, how do you transcend from a professional environment to a personal one? And I spend probably about a third of my year traveling around the world at this point talking about leadership. It's my favorite topic, and I always am very open with the people that I'm talking with that the things that I talk about are not my creation. I mean, it was something that was taught to me generationally through the SEAL community, and the people that taught me, they didn't create it either. It probably goes back, general military leadership principles go back to the times that people picked up sticks and swords and bows and arrows. I mean, it hasn't changed that much. But the amazing thing is that they apply universally, at least in my opinion. There actually is no such thing as military leadership. You have two types and two choices. There's good leadership, which is effective, and then there's bad leadership, which is ineffective. And any title that you put to that, that's to me, I've always noticed it's a little bit of an excuse. Like, oh, I have to lead this way because I work in this sector. It's like, nah, not really. You know, you can lead effectively and well, or you can't. But beyond, you know, the military is obviously rank driven, as you know, and it's, you know, it's structured. There's a ladder, just like there is in the corporate world. And people often think that if you don't have a leadership position, that you don't have an opportunity to lead. And that's another thing that I always make a point of addressing when I'm speaking publicly is you have an opportunity to lead 24/7, regardless of who you are and what you are doing. Because if you don't have a leadership position, you can always lead by example. And that has to do with how you conduct yourself. And that ties into the question that was asked, you know, the leadership characteristics. And the first one that I think all of them are really, you know, pinned in the ground to is humility. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have an ego, because I think we can all agree that's impossible. And the person that tells you, hey, I don't have an ego is probably the one you should use with the most caution, because they just told you it's massive.
Right.
But you should have to keep it in check. And you need to keep it from interfacing with your decision-making process. That's the danger of ego. So, you know, if you can be humble, you can be a little bit more objective about who you are, how you're acting, your actions and behaviors on your subordinates or the people around you. If you're not in a leadership position, maybe it's just your friends and family. So it's, you know, humility, accountability is the next one that we harp on. And that's just the willingness to raise your hand and say, hey, I fucked up. Like, this is on me. And it's so easy to sit there and talk about being accountable. And especially in the world that I came from, it's so hard to stand up in front of your peers that are A-type driven, that have been screened and refined throughout a career, that are high performers, and to raise your hand and be like, yeah, you guys all remember when that sucked? That was my fault. That was on me. But you have to be able to do that. And especially as a leader as well. And, you know, it's very easy to say, you know, when the team is successful, you give your credit to the team. And when the team fails, as a leader, you step up and you shield them from that, that doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable, but it means that you stand up as the leader and take accountability for the shortcomings. You know, clear and concise guidance is another characteristic that we focus on. And a lot of that is driven, I think, because we talk on the radio often. We're almost always disaggregate. For me to be in a room with more than one or two people that I'm working with would be pretty abnormal. Mm-hmm. And we could have people all over the place. And the more you talk over a radio, I swear they're designed to work less effectively, the more words that come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So if you want to rattle off a Steinbeck novel, halfway into that thing, people don't even know what you're talking about. So refining all of your guidance down to something that's clear and concise. And for people in a professional setting, if you go to your people and say, you know, let's sit down and let's talk a bit over coffee, I want you to explain to me what you think the roles and responsibilities of your job are. If they can't give it back to you in a clear and concise manner, then you have work to do from a leadership perspective. Because if your people can't tell you what their job is or the roles and responsibilities of their job, they're probably going to struggle in the execution of that. Mm-hmm. And that one also applies both personally and professionally. You know, the more clear and concise you can be just in your communication with people, the less likely, you know, that there's going to be things that are lost in translation. And then the last one for a characteristic that we screen for in the community when it comes to leadership is control of your emotions. And this is another one where people will think I'm saying be an autonomous robot. And it's actually the opposite of that. I think you have to be we're human beings, right? We're an emotional creature. I think we need our emotions to, you know, it ties into our morality to a degree. But sure, just like when it comes to humility and ego, you can't let that override your decision-making process. So it's okay to be scared. And when people tell me that they, you know, they're like, oh, when I was in combat, I was fearless. And it's like, really? Were you? Because it kind of sucks and it's kind of scary. So how about we just say, you know, there's fear present, but instead of allowing the fear to control me, I maintain control of my emotions. And it allows you to objectively work through problems instead of emotionally making decisions. And in my opinion, at least, there's really no benefit to having your emotions tied to your decision-making process. There's no upside. Right. But the downside is basically a trapdoor that could be unlimited. So that's, you know, it's a long-winded answer to his question, but it's humility, accountability, clear and concise guidance, and control of your emotions. And that applies personally and professionally. And people, if you want to be a good leader and have a leadership title, the best time to start practicing those things is right now when you're not in that position. Mm-hmm. And then you'll be prepared.
Yeah, it reminds me of what I'm always talking about with jiu-jitsu as it relates to fundamentals. They transcend the environment. These are good rules for everybody, for everything.
Yep. Doesn't matter what you do.
When you were on the job, did you have soldiers that came to you after a combat mission that maybe privately had felt some sense of shame or wondered if they were in the wrong job because they had gotten scared?
It wasn't, a lot of the times those conversations do happen for sure, but it almost would be, I think they would bottle them a little bit until we got back from overseas. And a lot of those conversations would occur in bars.
Okay.
Strip away a few of the societal layers with about, I don't know, anywhere between 12 to 26 cocktails. I mean, it's amazing the conversations you can have.
Right.
I never had anybody express that to me overseas. I did have people that would want to come and talk about decisions that they had made, and they were curious as to whether or not they had made the correct decision.
Mm-hmm. What was your answer to people like that generally? I know you have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but somebody that came to you and said, and was expressing, because I used to hear this quite a bit from younger fighters.
Yeah.
That would have their first fight in the cage and then think after that they would feel bad because after that they would still have the same situation where a week prior to the fight they couldn't sleep. And I would just explain to them, it's just your body. It's just natural.
Yeah. When people would come to me, and, I went to people when I was younger as well. Towards the tail end of the career, people are coming to you. And I absolutely went and sought guidance from people when I was younger. And, the first thing, when it came to making decisions, the first thing that I would ask them was to explain the situation to me through the lens of the information they had at the time when they made the decision. Because oftentimes when they were coming to me questioning whether or not they had made a decision, what they were adding to the narrative were things that they did not know in the moment that they had to decide.
Yeah.
And it's, you don't have that much time to make a decision overseas. Sometimes you really do. You can watch people for a long period of time. You can watch them develop their pattern of life so you can see things that are atypical. And then sometimes you come around a corner and there's somebody standing there, and if you were to have a half of a second to make a decision, that's a really long time. I mean, some of them are just complete rote snapshot decisions based off the information that you have. And so I would always start them with, explain it to me via the information that you had, and then let's look at that, the decision that you made based off the parameters that we are trained to work within, the legal parameters that overlay on top of that. And I never had somebody at the end of that who was questioning at least the morality or legality of their decision, because they were I found that they were adding things that were external after the fact,
right?
Which it's not a perfect system. People think that war is a scalpel, and it's not. It's probably a rusty, shovel at best. It's, it doesn't cut clean.
How you deal with regular people who don't have a lot of experience with maybe violent conflict, the emotional impact that has on them, having to defend themselves. I think he means both. So someone who maybe would otherwise hesitate to defend themselves and gets put into a situation where maybe they don't even think they're capable of it. How would you talk to them? And I think he's also talking about how would you talk to somebody that had to do it post fact and maybe had a little guilt about it.
Yeah. So that's a good question. And you see some really visceral reactions from people. If you ever see violence out and about, like a fight in a public area or something like that, I don't really watch the people that are fighting because they don't know how to fight, so it's boring. But I'll watch the people around. Like if people are getting into an argument, they're yelling and shouting at each other. If you watch the people around, there's some really strange reactions from people, and you can tell who's not been exposed to violence before or never considered, played the what if game. And that's interesting from a coach's perspective. For us, how do we get people like that to understand they have to go? You've got to start fighting.
What is it when you're watching the crowd that they haven't experienced it before?
Sometimes you'll see people start crying. You'll see like women, sometimes younger girls, and you'll see them, they just start crying. They just, freak out. They have nothing to do with the situation. It's just so abnormal and so frightening to them to see violence. You'll see guys who are just you'll see them kind of cringing, you know, almost subconsciously, like, like that flinching type thing. You'll see that kind of stuff where guys just, it's one of those things where they just haven't been exposed to it, and to see it, it just freaks them out, for lack of a better term, you know. And it's interesting to watch, you know. It in the beginning stages, you know, once if it continues, then they'll kind of get past it. But it's just in that initial, like, holy cow, you know, these guys are going to kill each other moment type thing. So I always come back to, in prepping people for those moments, you have to think about what you're fighting for rather than what you're fighting against. So my determination is always to continue to live my life. You know, I've got a good life. I'm thankful for everything I have. My life is very beautiful. It's amazing sometimes, you know. I had there's a joke. Somebody said to me, so I had an opportunity recently to get some stuff from a gun manufacturer, and a guy said, "Oh, it must be nice." And I'm like, kind of is, you know, like, you know, but it's one of those things where, you know, I think about that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want anybody to take me from that. I don't want anybody or anything to take me from that, because violence isn't always another person. Violence could be a car.
Right.
You know, it could be a car crash. It could be something just insane happens, and not insane, but just something you never thought of that happens to you, and now you've got to deal with it. You know, and so that kind of stuff, I think about in those moments, that I'm going to live because I love my life. I don't care what it is in front of me. I don't have time to hate them. I don't have time to get mad or rage or anything like that. But you're not taking me from all the things that I love, period. And so that usually connects a little better for folks, especially people that come from a background where they don't have that well of negative experiences. You know, you see one place you'll see these guys, like in the ultra marathon guys, guys that do triathlons and stuff. A lot of times when I'm training with those guys or training around those guys, I'll talk to a lot of guys that, or gals that have dependency things that they overcame, like drug addiction, alcohol addiction, sexual abuse, you know, physical abuse, all that kind of stuff. And they're coming, so they dig into this well of just anger, you know, to suffer, to get through. Because it, you know, I'm not planning on running 50 miles unless somebody's chasing me. And but they're going to run this 50 miles. They dig deep into this well of just hatred and hurt, and just that motivates them and drives them. But for the most part, a lot of people don't have that. And so trying to get somebody, like, you got to get mad, you got to rage, like, they don't have those experiences. They don't have that to tap into. And the other side of that is, you might not want them to tap into that in a training environment, because I'm not a counselor, and I'm not a mental health professional. If we do tap into something and open Pandora's box, I can't help them. I just created a problem for them that I can't help. And so I stay away from that side of it and focus completely on what they love. And that comes from one of my friends that does Ironmans, where we talked about it. And I said, hey, you know, Steve, like, all these guys are just mad, you know, like, I did not expect this, you know? And he goes, yeah, man, it's like that. But I just focus on that, you know, how much I love doing this, and how much it's just amazing that I started out with asthma and sick, and now I can bike 70 miles and swim a couple miles and run a marathon all in one day. And, like, how awesome is that? And I thought, that's a much better approach, you know? And and that kind of altered how I approached self-defense with people, because I kind of was in the middle on that. Like, maybe we need to find a way to get these people mad, because they're so timid and so, you know, laid back and just lack exposure to violence. But then I realized, like, what if I tap into, listen, you know, do you like your life? Do you like being able to see your children or your grandchildren? Do you like being able to visit with them and all the things that you do? Do you like that? Do you love that? Well, this person is going to take that from you.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to fight. You have got to fight, you know? And so, and then you can kind of, after doing that, then you can slowly kind of ease them into if you don't fight, they're going to get past you and get to all that you love. You're the line in the sand. You have got to stop them. They've got to stop here, you know? And so that's kind of how I do it. Mm-hmm. And that's worked pretty well for most of my trainees. That really works well. And then for the post stuff, I try to get them to, you know, kind of almost back to like that Byron Katie kind of work thing. Like, is this true? How do you know it's true? You know, it's almost kind of like those questions where they start to have these negative thoughts. Like, man, I can't believe, like, I didn't want to hurt anybody. Like, maybe I shouldn't have, you know, and you will have people, and I know you have, you have people that say, maybe I shouldn't have hurt them that bad. Or maybe like I shouldn't have gone that far. Or maybe they wouldn't have if maybe by me fighting back, it caused it to happen. And you just have to like get through to them. How do you know that's true? Mm-hmm. You know, is that true? Like, listen, this person has a history of this. You know, if it's a domestic situation or something like that, like they've done this to you before. Like you have a history with them doing this. So we know that's not true. You know, so you go through kind of those questions and answers with them where you get them to just kind of answer it for themselves, because they're not going to hear an outside voice. All you can do is guide them. You can't tell them. You just have to guide them into seeing for themselves that what I did in that moment, based on what I knew, was the best thing for me to do. There's 1,000 other ways I could have done it, but right now, in that moment, I did the best that I knew to do. And so once you get them to understand that, then later we can kind of gently begin a more heavy duty debriefing kind of with them, where we go back into, okay, well, at this moment, maybe you could have done this mm-hmm. and altered the outcome at this moment. But you can't do that when they're still in that state where they're like second guessing themselves. Yeah. You got to get them past that and then get it into, what can we learn from this? You know, and I try to frame it in, I don't need to learn, you don't need to learn this because you've been through it. But how do I better relay this to others?
Right.
You know, like if you had to tell someone else.
So you're not laying some guilt on them.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I don't want to do all that work to get the guilt off of them, only to come back and hit them with it, you know. So I want to get them to that place where they can go, okay, well, how would I tell somebody in the future, what are some options? Mm-hmm. You know, what are some better ways, better things to do? You know, and there's always better ways to do it. And then once you get them in that mind frame where they're looking at it from that perspective, like, hey, how do I pass along these lessons? Because I tell them, listen, statistically, there's not that many people that are going to experience whatever they experienced, if they experienced violence to that degree where it went physical. So your data point is important, and we need to take the lessons from your data point so that we can pass it on to others, because we don't have enough of this information. And usually you'll see them click, like they get it, like, boom, I am the vessel of knowledge, you know, and they just sort of like, I can help others. And then that's how I kind of ease them into that, where they have that moment of, oh yeah, okay, so if I were to tell someone else how to do this, this is what I tell them to do.
Yeah.
You know, and then that alleviates the guilt, because they shouldn't feel guilty for defending themselves,
right?
You know, ever. But I'm telling you, man, good people have a hard time with hurting other people.
Sure.
You know, they really do.
Can you distinguish between what you said earlier, a martial artist and a fighter?
Well, a martial artist trains when they don't have a fight coming up. They train if they feel good. If they don't feel good, they put the gi on. You know, they box, they kickbox, they do whatever they're told to do. You know, Eric Enders is a world champion in IBJJF jiu-jitsu. You know, Walt fusses at me all the time about giving him more stripes on his blue belt, you know, because yeah, man, I got another stripe, coach. I submitted this first day, I get another stripe,
Nice.
you know, and that's not how it works, obviously, but the fact that it's important to them. It's important to me. Everybody puts the gi on.
Yeah.
They train when they don't have a fight. When they do have a fight, if they feel good, if they don't good, there's no such thing as camp. This is just the life that we live. And then obviously when you get closer to the fight, you tighten a few things up. You change the way that you eat a little, especially if you're dealing with heavyweights, you know, or bigger guys like Eric and Walt. Like, you got to get on their head early about the things that they're eating. But there's no shortage of gym time. And even when this whole thing went down, it was like, how are we going to train? It wasn't, are we going to train? Are we going to be able to train? It was like, how are we going to train?
Right.
It's like, I got you, dude. We're just going to train. You know what I mean? And that's what we did. And it's been cool. It's been good. And that's what I mean about the difference between a fighter and martial artist. A fighter only trains when they have a fight. They don't really embrace the martial arts and the lifestyle and the you know, the way that you're supposed to live, the lifestyle that comes along with not only being a professional athlete, but being a professional athlete of the combat arts, a martial artist, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what we live, we breathe. Like, this is what you do. This is your family. This is your squad. This is how you know, there's no such thing as, you know, time off. You get right back in the gym. And when we don't have a fight coming up, that's when you start working on new stuff, and we're constantly evolving and developing. And in every single solitary aspect of martial arts, like, we have a good jiu-jitsu program. I love the fact that we do jiu-jitsu. We have, you know, a really good program with really good coaches, and the guys all work and participate in that. And if they want to go compete in that, they do. And we compete at a high level. If they want to do Muay Thai, we have high-level Muay Thai program and coaches. And if they want to go compete in that, they can. Boxing, the same thing. Wrestling, the same thing. So I think that's unique to have everything under one roof, that we really, truly do focus on every aspect of it. Like, I love sport jiu-jitsu, even though it's not really applicable to self-defense or MMA, worm guard and all the lapel guard and all that stuff. I think it's cool as hell. Right. You know what I mean? I'm not necessarily going to coach that or teach that or put it through that filter for our people for what we're doing. But I love to learn that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? You're not going to catch me teaching that in class. You know what I'm saying? But I love to learn about it and watch it. You know, I'm from the old school, just like you, Coach, but I train with the new school, you know? And I think that's important so that you can stay current and you can be able to address those things. And I think that's part of being a martial artist is delving deep into every single solitary aspect of it. I think we've been talking about this in SBG for a while, that the width of the game is there. Boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing. The depth of all those games is never ending. And I want to delve into all of them, figure out everything I can to be the best coach that I can be. And I think that the athletes kind of take that as well. They want to be the best at everything. So when we don't have fights coming up, we're looking to grow. And you know, that's the difference between a martial artist and a fighter. A fighter is just, they only fight. They only care about themselves. Yeah. They only train when they have a fight coming up. If they have a bad time, they don't show up at all. If they're going through issues, they don't show up at all. A martial artist is going to train regardless of what's going on in their life. Right.
When Walt and Eric retire, they're still going to be coming in and probably doing jiu-jitsu and training and teaching. And
they've already said that. When Walt retires, he wants to win a jiu-jitsu world championship.
That's awesome.
He wants to win a gold medal in a gi.
Yeah.
And then he wants to win some stuff in no-gi as well. Like, there's a whole list of goals that they have that they speak that into existence quite a bit, you know.
That's awesome. And that's exactly what SBG is supposed to be all about. That's not always an easy conversation to have. And obviously we all still get a little bit of pushback on that. And I can even see from some of the comments from the video I did with Burton, the podcast with Burton, there are people who are still trying to walk the line and do both and haven't come to the same conclusions that we have, I think, as a whole organization has about that. What would you say to those people as to why you don't think they're congruent?
You know Francis Collins?
The scientist.
Right. So he was the head of the NIH.
Yeah.
and this is not to get into religion and things, but I find it fascinating that he was almost a born-again Christian, and there's a whole story about him in the woods and 3 frozen waterfalls. Yet every day he got up to go to work to crack the code for DNA. I mean, I believe that he was a very important part in the final sequencing of the genome.
Yeah.
And I never understood how he could hold those 2 views. And in some ways, I see trying to balance alive with, I'm not going to say dead because we do train dead sometimes. What would you use for the other side?
Sclerotic tradition. So it's a dead pattern, a series of dead patterns. So it's just a dead tradition.
Okay. So I don't think that one can balance 2 things that are so far apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how if you end up in the middle, then you lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think people need to pick a path.
Mm-hmm.
And if that path is supposed to lead to truth, then you can't hold on to falsehoods at the same time.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. Obviously, like I said, I completely agree with you. I think it's even more to your point with Francis Crick, the argument that I'm sure he makes and that people will make for him.
Not Francis Crick.
Francis Collins. Sorry.
Francis Collins.
Yeah. The argument that I think he makes and that other people will make for him as well, it's not, non-overlapping magisteria, the old Stephen Jay Gould argument. But with martial arts, it's not that at all. We're actually talking about theoretically the same thing, unless the instructor comes right out and says, we're only doing this for cultural reasons. It has nothing to do with fighting, which of course they never do. They're actually trying to blend astrology with astronomy. That's the way I look at it, And why would I steer a student and go, yeah, no, you should really go study astrology for 3 years before you go get your degree in astronomy, because that's going to be useful. How? Right?
Yeah, and the thing, even now, so I'm going to take stick work as an example. I am glad that we did all that stick work, but I'm going to tell you why. It forced us to do something that was incredibly boring, which was move our feet around.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing more boring than shadow boxing or footwork. Now I've grown to love it, and I think it's one of the best training tools.
Yeah.
But I was speaking to Rory about this because I always prize myself as a big guy for the way I can move around. Can't dance, but I can move around in a ring or a cage.
Right.
And I developed so much of that through being forced to do it with the stick work. Now, it's not the better way to do it, which is what I figured out. So I am glad that we did it, and it helped me. I got a benefit from it. But it was circumtuitous,
Mm-hmm.
because most things don't transfer over. And maybe that's where we could remove a lot of that, or what is claimed.
Mm-hmm.
So we've both heard, like, the tip of a stick is moving 80 miles an hour. Okay, so is my car sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to have someone drive a car at me and evade it because it might help me slip a jab.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather have someone actually throw a jab at me.
Mm-hmm.
And since we all have a limited amount of time, I don't believe, do you believe in crossover? Do you believe, like, when you train one thing in another area, that it has a tremendous amount of crossover in another thing?
Not necessarily. I think you can take lessons from that and how to learn, but in terms of direct applicable skills, I think you'd have to be doing something that, like we're saying, is congruent with the other activity mechanically.
So my goal was to get good at boxing.
Right.
I would have been much better served spending all that time doing footwork in a boxing sense. and having people throw jabs at me.
Right.
So I never look at the time that I spent doing all those other things as loss. There was certainly things that I carried with me, but there was a lot of wasted time.
Right. And you don't make your current students, and to be clear, I'm sure no one doubts the fact that all you, like most teachers, you want your current students to get as good as possible, as quickly as possible. They're a direct reflection of you as a teacher. So we all have the right intrinsic motivation there. And you don't take them through that process, though.
Talking a little bit about jiu-jitsu, and I think the what I found so interesting about your approach and how you view jiu-jitsu and how you try to teach it, I think so much of what you do with your approach is very similar to what I found so appealing and effective about the guys that we work with in Africa, in terms of it's not about technology, it's not about the latest move or technique, it's about what are the fundamental things that have actually been proven effective and battle tested in the real world over time. And I think that's really the connection for me between the two. I'm just a guy, like I have a day job, and sort of my value add to the whole project is we raise money here in the States to help pay for the helicopters and all the things that go on over there.
Right.
But when I do go into the field, I'm basically a liability. I'm not a South African who was born and bred in the bush. I don't know how to track. So when I first started going over there, I was involved in a couple incidents where when we're outside of the park, it's kind of a war zone, and the poachers would attack us. So we're involved in a number of ambushes. A number of our guys, have been brutally beaten by angry mobs in trying to transit in and out of the parks through the community villages. So when I first started going over there, I said, hey, for my own safety, but also for to try to not be a liability for the guys who are there trying to do the job of protecting. I said, I better try to learn some self-defense training. And I started Krav Maga because I figured, the poachers primarily would use broken bottles and sticks and bats and things like that. That was the weapon that they had most readily available. So I started with Krav Maga, and it was great. And I don't want to say anything bad about any other martial art, to each his own. But what I found very quickly was the practice of Krav Maga didn't translate well into what I expected to have to actually apply in situations where if somebody was attacking me. And what I found was the techniques that did innately appeal to me and just seemed obviously applicable to a real life situation. I would ask my Krav Maga instructor, what's the genesis of this? Where does this come from? And the answer was always, oh, this comes from jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So I at a point I basically said, well, why am I drinking the dirty water? I better go upstream and go to the source. And that's what got me into jiu-jitsu initially. But then, probably like everybody else who finds you that doesn't have access to an SBG gym in their location, over the internet and the amazing content you provide, I really found in your approach to problem solving, that connection for me, and that's why I came out to spend some time and train with you.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I think there's a connection to when you first started telling me about how they were connecting the poachers, how you guys were doing this successfully. It also, the concept of efficiency also came to mind. You have limited resources, you have limited time, and you have to be as efficient as possible. And actually what was fascinating to me after talking to you was the low tech solution turned out to be the most efficient solution.